you, what is culture?
Can we make a break?
Culture is the place that you live, the things that you do, the clothing that you wear, the attitudes that you have toward other people in your culture. You want to add something?
It's the way you live.
It's the way you live. Okay. And
I think it depends on the opinion of the teacher that asks you. For me, culture isn't something that is obtained or is kept. It's the daily acts of each one. For example, a person who lives in a first world country of Europe, England, any country of the first world have a daily act since they wake up until they go to bed. But a person of the third world countries on the route of development, like Chile, have two daily acts since they wake up until they go to bed. For me, culture is each thing that I do daily, each thing that I live, or each thing that I act. Simple.
Culture is a disagreeable word. So disagreeable, like the question you make me, what is culture? Is the word. Because it's like, I think that it's a word used for the people in general to cover something that they don't do. I explain myself. It's like we think that culture is like, sure, the habits and the custom of a certain specific group of people turning to their life. Um, but at the same time, also things in culture and say like books, movies, theater, art in general, like Santiago Mil, and results that the custom of that specific group of people don't have a really relation with the theater, literature, and the art in general. So they talk about culture, mixing those two things just to compensate their guilty for not dedicated to those things that are so pretty and important and says like one time of the year says like, oh, it's so pretty my culture with certain things, so let's make culture. That's how I see it.
let's see. For me, culture is in some way something that identifies us in a common background with other people and makes a personal identification in our life. For example, if I go to another country like Peru or Colombia, they have a social relation that let them have a cultural context different to us because our customs or vision of life is very different to the other country. So the context in a cultural level in general, we can have some appreciation, but in the reality is defined by the social context where I have a relation. Also, there's a general culture context of a country, but as well, I think that each one have a personal vision of culture.
For me, it's like a common tradition of a community. I have never thought the word culture. I have never go beyond. I never thought what is the real meaning of culture. For me, is that a tradition of a community, like a tradition that they have because each people, each country has its own culture.
For me, modern culture is training. For example, if I see to someone who threw a paper, for me that is not culture. For me, it's be careful with our planet and the nature too.
The meaning that you give to the culture doesn't take in all the topics for what the people use the word, but by convention or I don't know, the word is used to give sense to the qualities or the characteristics that determine the identity of people. So, for example, could be the language, many typical dances that could be historical or that aren't finished, are characteristic learned.
It's a very difficult concept because it has so many definitions, but the one I like the most is that culture is a whole of meaning shared from a community. In the bottom, when there's a culture, this means that a community of people situated in a specific time and space, they share certain codes, certain meanings, a language, traditions, um, what else? A story in common, for example. But the essential is that the culture always has an inherent part, which our ancestors give to us, but also we all produce constantly culture from the innovation that we generate in that meaning, in that sense. I don't know, pedagogy, the art, the music, is always going to be a cultural practice that takes the old things but always renew that to produce something different and that way satisfy the needs of the person in that moment. That is why I am a star for culture. What is culture for you?
Culture. One time I was talking with a friend and he said, culture is everything. But what he was saying with this, all the things that you do. Culture is all the human activities. So this is how I define this. For example, the music is culture. All the music. The strange music or the extreme music is culture. In the same way, I am saying that all the human activities, although the activities wasn't art, is culture too.
I think the concept of culture serves to the human to feel that you are part of something, like a sense of belonging, or to build a collective identity with other people and be different from others, like through of the things that belong to you as a Chilean or as a Mapuche or another ethnic, as a peer group, serve like to identify with others. So between those differences, you can build your own identity in a group.
What a group of people, or where this group of people actually belong to. Just for saying, like the type of clothes they wear, the kind of music they listen to, what they used to reading or not reading. And I think in that sense, culture is really pretty much related to identity, more than in the sense of knowing a lot and being a person who has been to a lot of different places and learned from many other different cultures. Yeah.
What is your concept of culture? For me, the culture is everything about a society, a family of or a person by his own. It's like the teaching of a person. In fact, culture came from cultivate, teaching, educate.
Culture. Well, for me, culture has different aspects. I think that culture, from the point of view as a country, is the ways you share a city, how we are as a nation, how we are as a group of people, right? But if you ask me for culture like art, it's the expression of the feelings of the person in different aspects: music, theater, literature, etc.
Culture. In my university and my high school, teachers taught me that culture is everything the men do, right? Everything is related to the formal art, particularly literature, visual art, architecture, and not formal art that is related to what we understand as popular character, what people do. Therefore, popular music, comics come to my mind, graffitis that we find on the wall at home or in the neighborhood. That is about how to express the city and people their own feelings. So the concept of culture is so broad, and the interesting thing is culture is essential for the development of societies.
I think culture is something that identifies you as individuals from a town, in the society, in a country. It's something that have a relation with our daily identity, the way we dress, the way we think. inside the spaces in which we live. It has to do with that.
Culture, big word. It's a set of values, ideas, and principles that are developed in a systematically way in the community.
We walked around Palacio La Moneda and we met Marisol Zubiabre, a woman from Curicó, Chile. She told us that culture is education, and education is what builds us as society. Should be more quality and awareness about it, because teenagers need it.
We also meet Takeo, who lives in Pichilemu, and his parents, Kotaro and Sakiko. They just arrived that day in Santiago. They are from Tokyo, Japan, and they told us that culture is about the habits of a group of people, the way they live, their customs. Takeo says that, for example, in Japan, all is very structured, and in the other case, in Chile, all is more flexible.
We have interviewed many people with their own concept of culture, but can they relate their own concept of culture with the Chilean culture?
In the last 20 years, even more, I'd say, the mass media has been more open and the communication technology has been more accessible to population. It's clear an influence of a style of art or cultural style or a lifestyle, right, that has been incorporated since the globalization and that affect us very much. And it makes us each time very similar to American culture. Because when we see it, we always say that cultural development through mass media has helped to expand the cultural spoliation, right? And that is the idea. Whereas through mass media, positive or not, we can incorporate new cultural elements to us. But what we really see actually is there's not so much cultural elements that we can choose from our world culture. So what we observe is basically the things that our not brothers, the Americans, give us with their own view of culture, right? And particularly from mass media.
Not really, because Chile will be missing.
I think our culture, as such, or as root, has been transgressed and invaded many times for the globalization. I mean, we are being a cosmopolitan country, and before we are not as today. But now we have taken in some way the culture from other countries, such as Peru, Colombia, and for that reason, Chile became multicultural. Also, there are other countries in the world that have got multicultures for their economic factors.
How can you relate your concept with the Chilean culture?
Well, I think that the Chilean lack of culture, principally. First, because the families of today left the teaching to the school, to the educational, to the teachers. Second, because we try to copy what happened or what do countries of the first world, but what they did before, not what they are doing now. For example, all the teens have a car now, until the lower class have a car, right? And the European countries are left to use cars because are using now bikes. Maybe Chileans should copy what are they doing now, not what they did before. Because of that, I think Chile lack of culture.
People are the same. Yes, they're very nice. Very nice, very friendly. A lot like where we live.
We don't know Spanish, so there's a struggle of communications at times, but we get by.
I think that the culture in Chile, there was a time when it was so poor, but it had been growing up. I think that the culture has played a really important role in our life. Many times it has tried to establish of an innate way the culture because it's art. The street art I think both helps. I think there's a construction and we can see that we are building a better culture for the people of today in way of art. That's very valuable. I think we are progressing.
We talked with a man called Luis Alarcón Yapa. He is a musician and he is part of the Aymara culture. We are going to hear his concept of culture and his music.
Culture is different from the point of view of people as seen here, as seen in an Aboriginal people. Here, for example, the culture is to have more knowledge. The more you read, the more copies of foreigners, the more you know, and for them that's culture. For ethnic, culture is to learn the customs, traditions, that's the culture. For example, Aymaras from the 4 or 5 years learn to raise their animals. Women begin to weave the, the 5 or 6 years. Pasacallos are called a braided cord with drawings with a meaning. Then make a headband, a belt, then able to create an axo, which is the female clothing made of wool, and that they weave themselves. When women learn to do all of that, there recently they can get married.
In the interviews that we saw in this documentary, culture is a concept that has many types of definitions. When we asked to the people the question, what is culture? They found it like a very difficult question, but they can be able to answer.